Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani. Welcome to another episode of Weighing In with Mark Ostrander. We're made possible by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your USA Wrestling and Nike branded gear. A lot of things going on in terms of recruiting and coaching and stuff like that. Probably the first piece of news, I spoke straight to Lou Rosselli about this. Nathan Tomasello is going to join the Oklahoma RTC. So he was coaching at Duke this year, took third at the trials, which was really good. There's a couple forfeits he picked up in there, but he made weight and stuck it out. So he's actually a national team member. Big pickup for Lou and Sam and those guys.
Yeah, it'd be a good place for him. He's going to bring a lot of knowledge to that program, to the RTC. So be excited to see what he does.
Yeah, and I think they had to work together when they were at Ohio State, right? When NATO was there. So I remember just texting with Lou, and he said, NATO's down here. I was like, really? He goes, yeah, he came out of retirement. He's going to try to make the team, because he had qualified. And you saw that with Frank Molinaro, a bunch of these guys, when they qualified. I'm a big believer you regret the things in life more that you didn't try, that you didn't take a shot at, than if you tried and failed. Okay, I did it, I'm going to compete in the jiu-jitsu world again at the end of the year. I just got the itch. I want to do it. If I lose, I lose. But I think I can win. And so I'm going to do it. And I may not win. I think I'm going to win or I wouldn't be doing it, but I may not. But I'd rather fail than say, what if? And so I think a lot of these guys, and it's a shorter cycle now. It's only 3 years, to 24, where it's obviously normally a quad. So that's a big pickup for those guys. They're slowly rebuilding that RTC. Kind of had some, had some problems there, but they made some staffing changes, and I think they're going to be back on the rise. They had a disappointing national tournament after an unbelievably good Big 12 tournament where they actually they tied Oklahoma State, and they were winning the whole time.
I know.
Oklahoma State had to run them down, which was, I think you could have won a lot of money saying that OU was going to be leading OSU going into Saturday and all the way up till the, second to last match of the tournament.
Yep.
So let's talk about University of Illinois. So Jim Heffernan retired. For people that only know Jim from coaching, he was an unbelievable wrestler, 4-time Big Ten champ, national champ. He was at the University of Iowa when I got recruited and went to Iowa State, and he wrestled Tim Krieger. Tim Krieger is the first guy to ever be seeded #1 at the Nationals every year. Krieger is a Mason City guy, awesome wrestler, 2-time national champ. I think this is the wrong order, but I think he was 1-1-2-5, So really good wrestler. But Heffernan was a great wrestler, super technical guy. I think he spent 29 years at Illinois. You're from Iowa. When you think of Heffernan, what kind of thoughts come to mind there?
He was kind of that's what Iowa wrestling was all about back when he wrestled. So I know he went over to Illinois with Mark Johnson. High praise for Mark Johnson, probably one of the best coaches I'd ever been around. I got a chance to work with him at the All-Star meet back in 2003. I got to be an honorary coach, and he was the head coach, so I got to work with him a little bit. What a great guy. Jim did a good job. I was kind of shocked he retired. I thought he just got a contract extension not too long ago. But this is a young man's sport. It's tough when you get up into your 60s, David. And I know you're not there yet, but when you're coaching and you want to be on the mat and you want to drill and you want to teach and, actually do your job, it gets harder the older you get. So kudos to him for stepping away and his family. He's done a great job at the University of Illinois, and I'm really looking forward to seeing who they bring in as a head coach, or if they just, move within, bring somebody up.
We're going to talk about that now. So first of all, before this gets out of hand, I'm a long way from my 60s. Okay, I need to get that on wax, okay? Like a good 10 years plus. So easy on that. All right. Second of all, I actually sat in on a recruiting visit that Heffernan, Hunter, and Mike Poeta did a couple years ago with Josh Saunders, who I think, I've coached some in the off season and,
Sure.
Good friends with his family, especially his dad, Nolan. And in that coaching meeting or in that recruiting meeting, Jim Heffernan told Josh Saunders he had a lifetime contract. He said, I'm not going anywhere. So I think it's really important to understand he made this decision, right? Like, in case anybody out there thinks like he was forced out, he wasn't. It was his choice. Okay. Second of all, what happens at Illinois? And this is probably the subject I've gotten the most text about since this broke. Okay. So sometimes I think we look at things in a macro way. And we're going to talk about that with recruiting here today too. The micro way is, well, they should open this up. There's all these great people and we're going to throw some names out there. I'm a finance guy. I kind of look at it bigger. Okay. Here's what I think. I don't think the University of Illinois is all that committed to winning in wrestling. Okay. They haven't built a facility in forever, right? University of Illinois, if they could keep the best kids in state, they would be a top 10 team easily. If you just took Austin O'Connor, Jacob Warner, and Tony Cassiope, okay? And I'm just picking three guys off the top of my head because I've been running errands all morning and didn't have time to do enough research on it. Just those three guys, that's a top 10 team.
Yep.
Okay? That's 50 points for sure. Okay? Maybe 45, okay? And I know there's other guys from Illinois. I mean, Illinois had a couple guys on their team that are from Illinois. So if you just keep the best Illinois kids, you could be really good. You may not win it. Sometimes you just got to get a little lucky to win it. The stars got to align. Pennsylvania's really good at high school wrestling. Ohio is really good at high school wrestling. Iowa has historically been good. It's kind of been a little Peaky Valley kind of thing. But Illinois almost always wins Fargo in freestyle.
They also win it in Greco a lot of times.
Most years, but I'm saying most people would not say that winning Greco translates to great college wrestling. Okay. Freestyle, I think, is a much more natural transition, but you're absolutely right. I don't want to dismiss that. Your point is correct and valid. But if you look at this and you go, when Illinois doesn't win Fargo or doesn't win junior duels, it's a huge upset. Like I called junior duels a couple years ago, Oklahoma beat them in the finals. And every single person from Oklahoma was like, Illinois is the gold standard. I mean, Illinois is the gold standard. Like Dylan Ragusin is from there. Fidel Mayor is from there. Abe Assad is from there. Like those teams are just freaking loaded. Okay. So here's what I think. I think if Illinois wants to be good, the University of Illinois, they've got to recruit. They've got to, get a coach that can keep the Illinois kids at home. And this is probably as good a time as any to bring this up. Scholarships work differently, okay? Like what I'm going to say isn't true for every single school. But at a lot of schools, first of all, the Division I scholarship limit is 9.9, okay? Yep. But 9.9 can get chopped up a lot of different ways. And the best way it can get chopped up, we're going to round it up to 10, just to stop saying 9.9. 10 scholarships. If you get, as a university, the equivalent of 10 out-of-state scholarships, dollar-wise, and full credits, like 21 hours a semester, plus 6 in the summer, plus 3 in the winter, plus full meal plans, plus full housing allowance, and then you're able to redirect those housing allowances above to apartments. And hey, you don't need the full meal plan because you can go to the training table. And so half your meals are covered. We'll cover the other half. And we can get you in-state tuition. In-state tuition is usually less than half of out-of-state tuition. You coached the national championship team in junior college. I coached the national runner-up team with my father in junior college. And it wasn't, those are not one-offs. You had a bunch of top 5 teams. We had a bunch of top 5 teams. I don't care how good your teams were. You always had a bunch of kids from Iowa on your team. We always had a bunch of kids from Missouri on our team. And a bunch of those kids end up being starters just because it's more expensive to bring kids in from out of state. And junior college is a fraction of the cost of D1.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on them, the importance of being able to recruit in-state and how important that is?
Well, I think everything has to start in-state, David, because that's where your backers are. Those are the people that support your program. If the best kids in the state of Illinois are leaving the state year in and year out, there's an issue. So you have to find somebody that they want to stay and wrestle for. You've got to build a tradition. Illinois has always been a talented team. They've had a lot of national champs. When Mark Johnson was there, they had, they were top 6, top 7 almost every year. Back in the era when I was coaching, they were really good. They had some really good teams. But they did it with basically Illinois kids and a lot of kids out of California because schools weren't really hitting California. And California, as you know, is one of the top high school programs in the country.
High school states, yeah.
Yeah, high school. Yeah, that's
Yep.
what I meant. So, I mean, you can add them with Pennsylvania, you can add them with Minnesota, you can add them with Illinois. California's right there. New Jersey, New York, Iowa, those are the people that you want to get into your program. So to keep the kids at home, and that's what Dan Gable was so good at, was keeping the Iowa kids in Iowa that he wanted. And they were 2-time state champs. Now, today, 2-time state champs are a dime a dozen. You see all these kids that are 4-timers from these states. But the 2-timers, they were able to turn into 2-time national champs, 4-time All-Americans. And that's what Gable was able to do. Mark Johnson did a great job at the University of Illinois doing that. Heffernan probably struggled a little bit compared to Mark Johnson. He did have some really good kids. I'm just kind of interested in who's going to get the job. I think they really need to go outside the program, David, and bring somebody in that can keep the Illinois kids there.
So there's 2 ways to look at it, right? So the assistant coaches there, I'll say this in alphabetical order because it's Jeremy Hunter and Mike Poeta, right?
Yep.
So Hunter was a national champ for Penn State. Poeta was a multiple-time All-American national runner-up for University of Illinois. I know both those guys. Hunter's much more introverted. Poeta is a huge extrovert. He would probably be the lead recruiter of those two. Poeta grew up wanting to wrestle for Illinois. And he actually said to me, he's like, I don't understand why everybody doesn't want to. But here's how you got to look at it, okay? There are certain states that other coaches are not scared to go into, okay? For example, when I was coaching in Merrimack, I didn't recruit Iowa because there was you guys, there's Ellsworth, there's Iowa Lakes, there's like 9 junior colleges. I'm exaggerating, but at least like 5 or 6 junior colleges are wrestling Iowa. So you're like, those kids aren't, unless you talk to somebody, like Willie Gadsden sent me a guy, but Willie Gadsden was my guy.
Sure.
Okay. And he sent me a guy that was 5th and ended up being 3rd at nationals because he was just a late bloomer. Kansas in junior college, bunch of JUCOs there. You're like, it's a waste of my time. I'm not, whereas if you go to another state like Ohio, there's no junior college wrestling. So you're like, not all these kids can go to Division I or Notre Dame. They got to go somewhere. I could get a kid from there, right? If I know the right coach, if I talk to the coach at XYZ High School, if I talk to Eric Burnett at Elyria, he might help me as an example, okay? No one's scared to go in Illinois. Years ago, no one used to be scared to go into Pennsylvania. I talked to Coleman Scott about this. I said, if Cale Sanderson was coaching at Penn State when you came out, I'll bet you don't go to Oklahoma State. And he kind of looked at me and smiled, goes, I don't know, coach. I said, just think about it. I said, you could have been closer to home, just as likely to win. just, maybe not as long a tradition, but a bunch of tradition, an Olympic gold medalist as a coach, just like you had, but you're closer, you're closer to family. And obviously it's a hypothetical question and there's no answer there is no, you would or you wouldn't have, but just people are less likely to go into Pennsylvania now because of Penn State. When Tom Ryan took over, less Ohio kids are leaving. They need somebody to fence off Illinois because like the University of Iowa, if you look at their starters, okay, Spencer Lee's from Pennsylvania, DeSanto is from Pennsylvania, Ironman's from Missouri, Murin's from Pennsylvania, right?
Yes.
Caleb Young is from Puxatawny, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Marinelli's from Ohio. Kemmer's from Pennsylvania. Nelson Brands is from Iowa. And nothing personal, but he's the worst guy on the team from Iowa. And Warner and Cassiope are from Illinois. And when Abe Assad was starting, he was from Illinois. So at one point they had a roster of no one from Iowa. But they're going into these other states. To me, a really interesting guy for the Illinois job would be Ryan Morningstar. Like no one's really talking about him, but he does a ton of recruiting for Iowa. Tony Ramos has recruited Illinois really well for North Carolina.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, then, you hear all the, the Zach Espositos, the Donnie Pritzloffs. Somebody talked about Mark Perry. I think Mark Perry is really happy doing what he's doing. When you do that, and I'm not speaking for him, but when you're a head coach, so much of your job is not coaching. It's administration, it's fundraising, it's shaking hands, it's meeting donors. And I'm not saying Mark Perry wouldn't do a great job. I think he would. But I think he's a guy that would rather watch film for 5 hours a day and break down how Kayla Miracle is going to win an Olympic gold medal. And, if you can make a living doing that and then help with Arizona State, but not do all that stuff, I think it's different. But I'll tell you this, like, this is a good job if they put money behind it. The other thing that I don't think anybody's talking about is I'm not sure how committed Illinois is to their sports. Because I was telling somebody this the other day. If you're the University of Illinois and you just could keep the best kids from Chicago every year in football and basketball, just those two sports, how are you not going to a bowl game? And how are you not making like the Sweet 16 or the 32 in the basketball tournament every year? And they're not doing that. Those are not their bars, like the bar of excellence.
Sure.
So I think it might be a bigger problem. Like I think maybe Hef and Poeta and Hunter are fighting an administration that isn't necessarily committed to wrestling. Like, look, Tom Brands, Terry Brands, Morningstar, all those guys, they're great coaches, right? If something happened, whatever, right? They hit the lottery together. They buy the $1 billion lottery ticket and they decide they don't want to coach anymore. Iowa's still going to be really good at wrestling because they're going to hire somebody. The University of Iowa is committed to being good at wrestling. They will not accept mediocrity. Like they will not accept being 15th. Okay. Like that, like, I don't even think they could say we were 15th in the same sentence with like that a bunch of people up there puking. Like they're committed to it. I think, Penn State, they're committed to it, right? Ohio State is committed to it. There's a bunch of
David, I think just to break this up just a bit. I think a lot of it has to do with the fan base. The fan base is committed to it. And the University of Iowa understands that we pack 15 to 16,000 fans in here for a duel, which basically the only other school that could possibly do that is Penn State right now. And I don't know how many people show up at the University of Illinois for a wrestling duel.
Well, Oklahoma State will get 10,000 for a duel, and Ohio State a couple years ago when we didn't have COVID packed the house. But it's a very short list. I just don't want to short those schools.
No,
okay?
But what I'm saying is that that's one of the reasons the school backs the programs so well is because of the fan base would not put up with anything less than the best. So That's one of the things. University of Illinois, I don't know if they have a fan base that pushes the administration to put the time and effort into some of the athletic programs there. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. The one thing I would take slight exception with is, that they won't put up with something less than the best. Iowa hadn't won nationals in 10 years when they won it. So clearly they were tolerating less than the best, right? Like they weren't winning. But I just think people go, well, look, if you get rid of Tom Brands, who's better, right? And when I say that's a short list, I don't know if there is a list, right? Like, they're going to hire an Iowa guy, right? Like they're not going to bring in, I don't know, whoever the hottest assistant coach in the country is right now. They're not going to bring somebody in. Like they would never bring in Zach Esposito to be the coach at Iowa, like that just wouldn't happen. Like they wouldn't bring Cale Sanderson in because he wrestled for Iowa State. Like when Gable did that all those years ago, that was like a huge thing, Yeah. So like, let's say Jordan Burroughs wanted to coach, I don't think they're going to bring him in to Iowa. I think Jordan Burroughs could go get the job at a lot of places tomorrow if he wanted to.
Like Nebraska?
No, I don't know. I mean, Nebraska's he doesn't want to be, he's moving back east. So you can kind of figure out.
I'm not sure he wants to be a head wrestling coach.
I don't think so either, but I'm just saying if he did, he'd be back east. And, you can do the math on that. So I'm just saying that it'll be interesting to see if these guys do a real search, right? Like if they go interview these people with credentials, but look, technique is super important, right? Like knowing the right things to teach guys how to win and lose matches, okay? But you can get a bunch of high-level assistants. You can build an RTC that you can have all those guys working on technique. Like Rob Cole looks like he's still in great shape, and I'm sure he still wrestles with his guys. But he knows how to run a program, and that's why Cornell's good every year, okay? Like Chris Ayers, I mean, he wasn't a fantastic wrestler. They're really good. Brian Smith was never an All-American. Pat Popolizio was never an All-American. Those guys are phenomenal coaches, okay? Sean Bourmet never won a national title. He's a phenomenal coach. Like, you don't have to be an Olympic champion to be a great coach. You got to surround yourself with other things and know how to run a program. And the number one thing, I've thought this for years, I think coaching in some sense is overrated, and I think recruiting is underrated. Like, I think we started talking, we used to not like each other. We were at the opposite schools and everything else, right? But I think we respected each other, and that's how we became friends and everything else. But if either one of us had a lineup full of 4-time state champs and the other guy had a bunch of state qualifiers, you can pick either one of us. The guy with a bunch of the state qualifiers ain't beating the guy with a bunch of 4-time state champs, especially in junior colleges when you only got 2 years to catch up.
Sure.
So recruiting is so important. It's the lifeblood of every program. Like you watch Nick Saban when Alabama wins the title, like the next day is like, I'm recruiting. Like it doesn't stop. Because these kids, they go through. So I think it's super important for Illinois to get somebody that can recruit Illinois. Now, I don't know who that is. I mean, I got some ideas, but clearly, like, I'm not on the search committee.
Sure.
But I think if they don't get somebody, they're going to stay a top 15 to 20 program. I think the math just shows if you get Illinois kids, and, you're going to get, nobody bats 100%, right? There's kids that come out of there and they're really good and they don't end up panning out in college. But if you get, usually Illinois has 8 to top 10 kids in the top 100 on every list. If they got 6 of those guys and 3 of them pan out, those guys alone are going to score enough to be in the top 15. Then you got to coach up the other 7 guys.
Yeah.
And be in the top 10.
I agree. I mean, we could spit out names all day long.
Who do you think if you put some names out there?
Who would I look at?
Yeah.
Casey Cunningham out of Penn State. And I would throw the kitchen sink at him to get him. I don't think he'd ever leave Penn State, or at least not right now. But, I mean, he would be a great pickup.
Okay. Who else? I like that.
I'm not sure Morningstar would be a great pickup because he is the third coach at the University of Iowa. And that's a big difference between being the, second coach and being the third coach.
Is Casey Cunningham the second coach at Penn State?
I think so. I do. I mean, I know his brother is there, but I think I think Casey Cunningham's the second coach at Penn State. I really do. That's just my opinion. I don't know enough about their program, but I would say he would probably be on a real short list that I would want to put in there. Mark Perry. I know Mark has always said he wanted to be a head coach at Division I. It's an opportunity. Now, you said it, you don't think he'd want to leave there right now because he's got a great position, and he does. Who wouldn't want to be at Arizona State right now? I mean, the weather's beautiful. He's got money. He's got support. They're doing a really good job recruiting, bringing people in there. He's got the, RTC. He's got the girls that have come in there. He's starting to get some really good athletes in there to work with. But being a head coach at a Division I school, especially in the Big Ten, you got to think he'd be interested if they talked to him.
Well, that's the one thing we haven't talked about. It's obvious to us, but Illinois is in the best conference in the country in wrestling, and they're in the center of that conference. It's not like they're Rutgers or Nebraska, like geographically on one side of it.
Or Maryland.
Sorry?
Or Maryland.
Yeah, sure. Okay, but they're in the middle of it, right? Like they're close to Purdue, they're close to Iowa, they're close to Ohio State. They're in the middle of a lot of things, and they've got a young team. They got, the Broncos didn't place this year, but they were ranked all year. They're going to get better. Those kids are just grinders. They got a pretty good recruiting class. They had Lucas Bird. They had some kids who were like #1 recruits coming out. Or a kid at least like that. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see the names that actually get interviews. Okay, like that's going to be fascinating. I think Tony Ramos is a guy to keep an eye on. He's from Glenbard North, so he's an Illinois guy. I think he wants to be a head coach. He was a national champion, and he was he was almost like Gilman before Gilman, right? Like people loved him or hated him, but everybody knew him. Yep. And being known is good. You're trying to get recruited. Like you don't want to be recruiting. You don't want to be the under the radar guy. You want to be that, who I am guy.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Let's do a share screen here. So we're going to pull up. This is the portal. So we talked a little bit, the transfer portal. I was talking to some people the other day. For people that don't know this, okay, the NCAA said this year didn't count towards eligibility. They also said you can carry these people over and it doesn't count against your 9.9, okay? Iowa's the obvious example. So whatever money that like Spencer Lee was on, Jaden Ironman was on, Kemmer was on, Marinelli was on, DeSanto was on. I'm just going to use those 5 guys. They might have some more, but whatever.
Okay.
Let's say all those guys are on 80% scholarships just to keep the math simple.
Okay.
That's 4 scholarships. So Iowa next year is allowed to have 13.9 as long as those 4 are allocated to those 5 guys.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean every school is going to do that. Just because the NCAA said, hey, you can do this, doesn't mean the Iowa administration said, yeah, we're just going to give away 4 more scholarships, right? And this is where, like we talked about, a school like Iowa says, we want to be good at wrestling. They might say you got it, or, hey, you got to go fundraise it or whatever, but yeah, fine. Other schools like, we can't afford that. I mean, there's, and we're not trying to put anybody out there, but there's schools that don't have the same, their wrestling's not viewed the same. I mean, hell, the opposite end of that is Stanford, right?
Yeah.
Where they raise $12 million and they can't keep the program. So actually, I'm going to go on a quick sidebar. I got a chance to interview Shane Griffith.
Okay.
So he first of all, that kid's awesome to talk to. Really, really smart kid. Very composed. I mean, you sort of would expect that kid that went to Stanford and won nationals as a freshman. Dave Bell, the coach of Bergen Catholic, set the interview up. It's on the Bergen Catholic Rockfin channel if anybody wants to see it. But a really cool interview. And he said, he goes, I chose the academic route the first time. He's like, so it's basically Stanford and the Ivies. He's going to graduate with his degree this summer.
Yep.
So he told us his short list, I'm going to do this in alphabetical order so I don't sway it. Michigan, North Carolina, Penn State.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about why he fits in each of those lineups or whatever else. Because, I mean, I think he may go 74, he may go 65. And first of all, if you get Shane Griffith, you figure out how to put him in your lineup. Like, that ain't really a problem, right? So, I mean,
I don't know about that.
People got redshirt years. You figure it out.
Yeah, but for some schools, it's hard to. Let's say he wants to go 74. Okay, let's say
it's okay. Fine. There's one or two schools in the country that got a problem. There's 70 that don't. Okay,
yeah.
So we're not going to focus on the statistical outlier. If you can go get Shane Griffith, you get him. Okay. Period. Like, you figure it out. Somebody Olympic red shirt, somebody gray shirt, whatever you got to do. Okay. But what was interesting, what I talked to him about, which is tied to this conversation, is being in the portal. Because he had to go into the portal.
Yep.
Okay. So the portal is where you declare, I'm not going back. I don't want to go back to where I'm at. Right. And Shane Griffith has no problems with Jason Borelli or that staff. They're cutting his program.
Yep.
Okay. So the big news was Max Dean going in, recently. Austin Gomez said he retired from wrestling because of concussions and then just went into the portal after saying that. But here's the interesting thing about this portal. You can't sign a national letter of intent again. You can only sign one, okay? You can sign a financial package, a scholarship, okay? But you can only sign one NLI, which means I can commit to you, Mark, at, Iowa Central 4-year university, or you can commit to me at Merrimack 4-year university, but it doesn't mean anything. There's no contract.
Okay.
The NLI is the contract. So, and you're not supposed to recruit kids once they sign with somebody else. Well, there's none of that here. So these guys are just going to get hounded literally till they step on campus and are there for 30 days and can't get out and go somewhere else. So the rumors I'm hearing, and this is a low key one, but this is big, Kyle Parko to Arizona State. Okay.
Oh, I thought he was going to Utah.
The Fresno kid, I'm hearing from very reliable sources he's going to end up at Arizona State. What's interesting about that kid is he literally lost his wrestle off at 41 and then All-Americaned at 49.
Yep.
I think we should also say this too. Every weight class in the country next year is probably going to be better than it was this year because people can leave, but very few people are. And there's a bunch of new people coming in. Okay.
And you have the Ivy Leagues are back.
Ivy Leagues are back, like a Mekhi Lewis who was hurt is,
sure.
Going to be, but just in general, it's not like, hey, XYZ weight graduated 5 of the 8 All-Americans. Like, no, that's probably not going to be the case.
Yep.
5 of the 8 guys might be able to graduate and leave, but they still got another year of eligibility. Yep. Okay. So Parko to Arizona State makes them a lot better, obviously. If he can All-American. And he's an interesting guy because he could go either way. I mean, clearly wasn't cutting much at 49 if he could make 41.
Sure.
So Max Dean, I'm hearing Michigan. Okay. Their family's from Lowell, Michigan. And, the Max Dean thing's interesting because like Rob Cole said that he wants to leave because the Ivy Leagues canceled the season and he's scared that could happen again. And he loves, those guys, he loves the kids. I know a father that said, he cried when he heard about this decision, Rob did. Gabe Dean put out a tweet that said, hey, I don't want anyone to think Spartan Combat had anything to do with this. We love them and what they did, which is their RTC. I think those guys are going together, that Gabe's going to go train with Max. I don't know if he wants to be a coach. I already wants to be in real estate, but either way, you'll probably find somebody to help you with that. And then we talked about Griffith. which is huge. I mean, when I talked to Shane, the interesting thing I thought was you recruited and you recruit on potential, right? Because as good of a kid is, like my biggest probably high school recruit coming out was Duran Wynn, who'd won Fargo. He won everything, you know? So you think he's probably going to be really good in college, but he hasn't actually wrestled in college. And maybe somehow he forgets how to wrestle when he gets to college, which he didn't. Okay. You don't even have to worry about that with Shane Griffith or Max Dean or Parko. Like they did it, especially Griffith. He won the dang thing.
Yep. And
he won it in a season with COVID in a state that was probably the most restrictive in the country while the walls were falling down around it.
Yep.
So if you're a coach, you're like, man, I get him 4 walls and I get him some training partners and he don't have to wear a mask every day. Like he's probably going to get better.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. This portal is going to change a lot, man. It's going to be huge in the game. What did you think when you heard about Gomez going, unretiring?
I'm happy for him if he can wrestle. I just think as a college coach, would you want to invest in somebody that's had concussion after concussion? Weight's an issue, always has been with him. They've got him marked as a 133 pounder. He may be at 141, 149. I don't know. If it was me, I would go after somebody like Real Woods over Gomez just because of the health. So that's what coaches are going to, be looking at. They're going to have to really evaluate the kids that are in the portal and decide who's the best fit for their program. And if we're going to bring in somebody that's had concussion after concussion every year, is already retired once, one bad day in practice could be it. And then, you don't have anything. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, you mentioned Real Woods, and he went in the portal, obviously says here a couple of weeks ago. He's going to be a huge recruit for a lot of reasons. The other thing about these kids, like especially these Stanford kids, they can get in anywhere in the country. You have your undergraduate degree from a place like Stanford. It's not like you have an admissions problem. Joey Prada is kind of a low key big recruit out there. Got beat out this year, by a kid that ended up being All-American as a freshman. But Prada's good, man. Like he won some big matches last year. When we were ranking him, you and I always thought like he's probably better than he's ranked. He just didn't have enough of the matches he needed. And he's a senior, and seniors are super interesting to get in the portal because they're like a 1-year rental, right? Like you can just use the money for 1 year. He either was great or he wasn't, but you get the money right back. So I think he's probably going to get a good offer too. I think I know we have a lot of people that watch and listen that support a certain college program, whatever it is, whatever it may be. Your college coach is checking the portal the first thing they do in the morning. That's the first thing they do. Now, the other thing is this: if your college coach is good, he already knows who's going into the portal and he's probably already recruiting them.
Yes.
Because we saw kids go in the portal and a day later commit to another school. Yeah. And, that's a little difficult to explain, right? Except maybe there were some conversations going on ahead of time. So, but like I get calls every week, like, hey, what'd you hear about this kid? What'd you hear about that kid? And it's interesting, like some of the stuff I hear, but this portal is going to change. It is changing the game. The portal and the RTC, how important RTCs are to schools is game changing. Like there's no way around it. So,
David, do you think kids are looking at this too and saying, hey, why does Penn State have 4 kids in the portal right now? Why does Ohio State have 3 kids in the portal right now? Do you think kids are looking at that saying, what's going on? Why are these kids not staying there, getting better? Why are they looking for a quick way out? I'm looking
at this right now. Like Campbell has 6 kids in the portal. Yeah. Literally. So I think sometimes, here's what I think. I think especially these freshmen, they had to make, a lot of these people had to make recruiting decisions based on like not even being on campus. Like I'm friends with a lot of guys that their kids are good. And like this dead period's unbelievable. Like they're making recruiting decisions based on Zoom calls. Like they've never been on the campus. They don't get to see what the dorms look like. They only get to see a picture of the wrestling room. You know, I mean, no, it's like dating online versus actually going to dinner with somebody. Like it's different in person. And so it's just, I think, and here's the other thing. It used to be that like you make a decision and if it's not a good fit, you just had to stick it out, right?
Sure.
Well, now you don't have to.
Yep.
I mean, I'll just say this, we're only got a few more minutes, but it's kind of like people say, hey, athletes are doing a lot more wrong these days than in the old days. No, because everybody's got a phone now with a camera and a recorder. And in the old days, there was like newspapers. And if you reported something bad about somebody, then, you know, that person stopped doing interviews with you. So even if you saw somebody doing something they weren't supposed to do, you just didn't talk about it because it didn't help you keep your job.
Sure.
I just think that, I mean, look, you and me were coaches. I'm still coaching. So part of you says, look, I brought these kids in. Sometimes you got to stick it out, right? And if you're old school, you're like, hey, the portal's bad because it gives people a chance to quit. And sometimes you got to push through life. And I see that side. The other side is, hey, like maybe I'm so-and-so and I'm third string at Iowa behind Spencer Lee and Drake Ayala. And I'm probably never going to start, but I'm pretty good. Like I could maybe even be an All-American, but I could certainly go to nationals for somebody else. And I want to do that.
Yep.
So I think it depends on how you spin it, right? Like if guys are leaving XYZ university, it might be, maybe the coach is happy for them to leave. I mean, I've talked to a bunch of coaches that are like, can so-and-so come back? They're like, yeah, we're not bringing him back.
Yeah.
And they don't have to give him money. So now it's like, hey, if you want to come back, Mark, you're a walk-on. Well, I can't afford to pay $50,000. And that's how you get rid of their money.
Sure.
So anyway, I'm headed to Sunkist this week to film a bunch of stuff out there. So we'll put that stuff up in the next week or two. And anything else before we part? I think we got about 1 minute. You got anything quick?
No, I'm good. I'm excited about Illinois, who's going to be applying for the job, who they're going to interview. I'll find out which direction they want to go, obviously. And you know what, David, next week we'll probably have 3 or 4 other names in the portal that we can talk about.
For sure.
It just keeps growing and growing, doesn't it? So
It does.
It'll be fun.
Right. Yep, for sure. Everybody, thank you guys for watching, listening, tweeting, texting, supporting us. We love doing this, and we love the fact that you guys are behind us. We'll speak to y'all next week.